12 years ago, I was a 28-year-old dude who really didn't have very many prospects in life, none that were particularly good, at least. I was dead broke, living in a van, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And I share that because I think a lot of people, regardless of how old you are, can relate to the feeling of, you have your external circumstances in life telling you like you're not doing well. You have the financial bank account, you look at it and it's in the red and that sucks. Maybe you're living in a rough neighborhood in a house that you don't like and you're having to have, 10 roommates to subsidize your living. Like maybe you have these external things in your life that you can point to and say that, it's not going to plan. And that sucks. But harder, I think, is the internal side. Is when you look at yourself in the mirror and you realize that you're not living up to your potential. You're not the person that you could be, that you were put on this planet to do something special, and yet this is it. This is all you're doing. And you wonder, what's the point of it all? And I think that internal discontent is so much harder and more pervasive than that external discontent. And even if you solve for the external stuff, if you don't solve for the internal, then it doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank. It doesn't matter where you're living. It doesn't matter what nice things you have. If you don't solve for the internal, you are always going to live feeling discontent and feeling like you haven't lived up to the potential that you have inside for yourself. And that is how I felt in a very real way at 28 years old. And that was the beginning of my journey on personal development, trying to tap into that internal side and trying to make that person that I saw in the mirror live up to the vision I had for myself. And what I want to share with you guys in this video, in this episode of the podcast, is 10 lessons that I've learned over the last 10 to 12 years of self-improvement, of personal development, that you can take these lessons and immediately apply to your own life. So lesson number 1 is this. The idea of a destination is the wrong frame. So a lot of times when we talk about progress or success, we talk about the mountain and like getting to the top, or it's a journey or it's a race, right? And people talk about it in terms of as though there is some place to arrive at, and that can be helpful to have that target off in into the distance that you are moving towards. But the better frame for me was something that I can't even remember his name now. I think it was Alan Watts. He talks about this. The better frame is, instead of thinking of life or thinking of your journey of personal development as some place you're trying to get to, instead to think of it more like a song or a dance. In a song, you don't play the note just for the sake of trying to get as quickly to the next note as possible. The goal isn't to get to the end of the song, right? It's not to rush to some final moment where you have arrived and you have completed the song. The purpose of a song is to play every note as beautifully as possible. And every note has its own unique length of time and intensity that you need to play it with. And so instead of just rushing through the chorus so you can get back to the melody, you live and you breathe in the chorus, and you let that chorus be everything in that moment. And then when you get back to the melody, you go and you live in the melody, right? So this frame has been incredibly helpful for me, because on this personal development journey that you're on, there is no destination, and that will weigh on you at times when you start to feel as though you're not making enough progress towards your goals. And instead, you can shrink this down to the day-by-day activities you could take, or the moment-by-moment activities, and say, what would it look like to play this singular moment beautifully? This moment right here, you and me on this, you're listening to my voice. What would it look like for you to play this moment beautifully, wherever you are? If you're on a treadmill, here in your car driving to work, wherever you are, what would it look like to play this moment beautifully? And if you can just string together beautiful moments, you will have created a beautiful song. So the second idea I want to share with you is the idea of progress over perfection. Again, a lot of times we get into analysis paralysis and wanting to have everything just right before we move forward. But the thing is, in that song of our life, when you play the wrong note, you don't stop and try to replay the note and just keep replaying the note over and over and over until you get it perfectly. Like, you make the wrong note and you move forward. You move to the next note. And in jazz, they have a saying, there is no such thing as a bad note, right? Because a bad note is always in context of what comes after. A wrong note, there is no such thing as a wrong note. You just take a note that doesn't sound good on its own, doesn't exist. It's in context of what came before and what came after. And so you might have played a note that doesn't sound good with the note that came before. You might have stumbled, but the note that comes after can give that wrong note, air quotes, context, and it can frame it. And this is why jazz musicians, they keep improvising. And when they make a mistake, they play through it and they don't stop and start it from the beginning. And in your life, you don't get a chance to replay the notes. You just get an opportunity the next time you come to the chorus, the next time you come to the verse, to play it better. But this time, you just have to play the note and move forward. And in the same way, you have to play the notes. You can't just sit there staring at the sheet music, waiting in your mind, trying to get it perfect, because the only way that it can ever be perfect is to actually do the thing. And the truth is, you won't do it perfectly. So focus on the progress over the perfection. Number 3, the more ways that you measure your progress, the more ways you can win. If you just measure your progress based off of if I get to the top of the mountain or if I get to the end of the song, then you only ever get to win one time. And there's a lot of time between when you start and when you finish where you're going to feel like you're losing. And so if you can shrink it down and find more ways to measure success in the moment on the day-by-day basis, then you have more ways to win. And you have more ways to give yourself that dopamine that you will need to be able to sustain the energy necessary to get to these big, audacious goals you have for your life. Number 4, measure only that which you can control. So if our life is like a song, well, we're going to have, it's not just you. It's not just a solo performance, right? You have people in your life. There are external circumstances occurring all around you. And the people you bring into your life, your brother plays the drums and your wife, she plays the flute, right? And they all come together to make this beautiful ensemble that is your life. But you can't control what they do. You cannot control the notes that come out of their instrument or the timing. You can't control any of that. You can't control how the audience will react. Can't control if the building that you're playing in suddenly burns down. You can't control any of that. All you can control is the notes you are playing on your own instrument. And the more you can zero in on what exactly is within your control and what is not, the more freedom and the more peace of mind you will have, because you'll find that the vast majority of things in life that we worry about are actually things that we have no control over. So my rule of thumb is if you cannot control it, then do not let it control you. Okay. Number 5, do not fall into the comparison trap, or rather, make sure that you're falling into the correct comparison trap. People say comparison is the thief of joy. I don't think that's entirely true. I think comparison and judgment is the thief of joy. If I compare myself to you and how you're performing, and then I judge myself as less worthy as a result of that, that is going to rob me of my joy. But if I compare myself to who I was yesterday, and I judge that I have made improvements, that I am better today in maybe some marginal way, then that's not a thief of joy. There's a lot of pride. There's a lot to take from that and say, I have improved. I'm a better person in so many facets of my life than I was 10 years ago. And when I focus on that, when I make that comparison, that's a beautiful place to be. The worst comparison is, well, there's 2 worst comparisons. One is when you compare yourself to other people, where they're playing an entirely different instrument than you. It's an entirely different song that they're playing. Why would you compare your song to their song? They're completely unique. The second bad comparison is when you compare yourself to who you were before and you realize you haven't made progress. You've not actually moved forward. That right there is what happens, will lead you to a place where you'll one day look back at 82 years old with regret, because you'll look back and you'll realize you didn't move forward. The person you were at 20, at 30, at 40, they didn't live up to their potential. They didn't move forward. And now you're 80 years old and you're stuck and you have regrets because there's no time to go back and fix it. Number 6, do less, but better. This is a line from Marcus Aurelius. He said I think to experience joy or contentment, focus on simply doing what's essential. Do less, but better. And so much of what we do in life is just not essential. It's not important. It doesn't actually move us forward towards our goals. And when it comes to personal development, when it comes to self-improvement, you can read 100 different books. You can have 100 different things or habits and routines that you're trying to implement into your life. And it can all be very, very overwhelming. And in fact, even a list like this, where I'm giving you 10 different things to unpack, that's too much. You need to take one of these, whichever one resonates with you most deeply. You need to put it on the forefront of your mind, pin a sticky note into your brain, into your mind's eye, and then just work on that one for the next year. Like, take one of these and just work on it for a year at a time. Don't take all 10 and try to implement them simultaneously. Just find the one that resonates, and you will know, like, one of these will stand out to you and you'll go, that's the one I struggle with right now. Make that the priority. Forget everything else, and then come back to this in the future. Number 7, beliefs limit us more than our reality. And so whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're ultimately right. And this is, it's trite. It's, people like to poke holes in this and be like, no. Like, certainly there's some things in your life that you cannot physically do. And I just choose to believe that that's not true. I choose to operate in a world of optimism and belief that if I can see it in my mind, I can make it a reality. And everything short of that is simply a limiting belief. And I know that's a hard concept for a lot of people. For me, especially in my 20s, I was a hyper realist. I hid behind pessimism with the guise of I'm a realist. Like, I'm not optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I'm just a realist. Truth is, I've never heard anybody say that they're a realist who, in my mind, it didn't just jump straight to they're a pessimist. I've never met a successful person who says I'm a realist. Not one. Like, I've never met a single person who's more successful than me who's just been like, I'm a realist. The people who say I'm a realist are usually middle class, barely scraping by, and not people that I would choose to swap places with. So I encourage you to not swap places with them either. Number 8, when you begin matters more than where you begin. A lot of times we feel so far behind in the game. I was 28 years old before I really started on this journey. And for a lot of you, that will sound really old. For some of you, that'll sound really young. You might be listening to this right now. You might be 47. You might be 62. And you might think it's too late for me. I didn't start early enough. The truth is, when you begin matters more than where you begin. Starting the journey today is better than waiting until tomorrow, waiting until 5 years from now, right? The old proverb, the best time to plant a tree that you want to sit in the shade of is 30 years ago. The next best time is today. So when you start matters more than where you start. So stop delaying, make today day one if this is something that's actually, resonating with you. Number 9. Number 9 is interesting. The gap between where you are in this moment and where you're trying to go, it never shrinks. It never gets smaller. So like, if we go back to that idea of the mountaintop, right? As we hit the milestones, the markers along the way, we just push the goalpost back. And let's bring this to the other analogy of the song. Nobody gets to the end of the song of their life, right? Like, you didn't get to the end of the song. Like, I did my objective, and then you just put down the instrument and stop playing. You have to pick it up and play the next song and the next song and the next song, right? Like, that's what your life is. It's just a series of songs as you move from this objective to the other objective. And so that gap between where you are currently and the end of your song, it never really shrinks. You're continuing to play it every single day until you die. But the gap between where you are in the song right now and where you were when you began it, that's only ever expanding. And it's in that gap, I think, if you can focus on that and compare yourself or look and see the progress that you've made since you began your song, the more gratitude, the more thankfulness you'll feel. And that's particularly poignant and timely today because I'm recording this. It is Thanksgiving Day. So if you want to find a lifetime of gratitude, do not focus on where you are and where you're trying to go. Don't focus on that gap. Instead, focus on the gap between where you are and where you began. There's a lifetime of gratitude to be found there. Number 10, and this is maybe the most important lesson I can share with anybody that wants to turn their life around, is that in the games that are most worth winning in this life, the games of infinite potential, not a zero-sum game where there's just a simple one winner or one scenario where you reach the end and you say, I am the victor. Like the infinite games of life where you're simply rewarded for continuing to play it as well and as for as long as you can. The games of relationships. You don't win the game of being a brother. You just try to be a better brother today than you were yesterday, right? You don't win the game of business. You just try to build a better business today than you had yesterday. You don't win certain games. And the games that are most worth winning in life are those types of games where there is not just a end state where you raise your hands in victory and say, huzzah, I've done it. And in those games of life that are most worth winning, you can't win if you don't start, and you can't lose if you don't quit. And it's the same in this game of self-improvement, of personal development. You can't win if you don't start. You can't lose if you don't quit. So take these 10 lessons, pick one, make it the focus of at least the next month, and then let me know in the comments. Shoot me a DM. I'd love to hear from you guys. Which one resonated most with you? Which one are you going to actually focus on? And I will look forward to hearing from you. But until then, stay hyper-focused, my friends.